Hey guys, how you doing? Night Raid Gaming here with a quick review of franchise Hockey Manager 9. I am doing a series of this game currently, a 1988 historical save of the Kings. So if you kind of want to see how the gameplay in more detail works and kind of how it flows, you can watch some of those videos. But just wanted to do a quick recap of the game so far and how it's playing compared to some of the prior versions. Steam Workshop mods from 8 have pretty much already been put in. So logo pack that updates, puts tons of minor leagues logos in, missing logos for some of the older leagues in history, and a lot of the international leagues. Those are it's a huge pack. So pretty much should cover anything you're interested in. The historical face gen library updates the historical faces. I'll just go ahead and load my game real quick. Since it is historical, famous players and even some of the lesser known players will have an updated model that hopefully looks more like the person in question. Like, for example, the mod is adding this Gretzky face here. Bernie Nichols is from that mod, and Luke Robitaille as well. Now, I'll say compared to 8, the game is running a lot faster. Seems like it doesn't take as long to simulate games as compared to 8 or prior versions. One of the new features that was added this year is the team harmony, which player personalities now have mechanics tied to them. I think in prior versions it really didn't do anything. It was ported from Out of the Park, but didn't really work in a hockey context, so they finally added some mechanics to it. So you can see I have all these guys as leaders here. All these guys are popular. And the only outspoken people are Dino and Wayne McBean. But there's no issues. My team's winning games. We're doing really well. I don't know if it's just if I'm really lucky here, but I haven't had any problems. I know this can cause issues. Let's flip around to some of the other teams. So there are some different stats. You can see the Blackhawks is getting lower. Who's doing bad? I think it's the Penguins who are suffering miserably. Yeah, and here we go. So the Penguins are having some issues here. They're not that bad. They're 8-7, but you see there's conflicts here. Rob Brown's not getting along with Bork. Dave Hannon is not getting along with Bork. Bork has problems with everybody across the board. And that's kind of reflected here with his outspoken thing. So that's causing them some problems, and they're not performing up to standard. So that could cause you to decide how you're going to manage some players a little differently. I don't think you would want to trade raid Bork, but it does put you in a conundrum here. There was talk about that cliques, which is kind of like slightly more positive, where players like each other. But if you break up the clique, that will upset the players and cause some issues. So some new challenges there. Could make your game harder, could make it easier, but provide some kind of real world context, a little bit of storylines to your game, so that's pretty fun. I've noticed that there are a lot of real world events, new real world events of weird things happening to players, somewhat like Out of the Park. As compared to other versions, I noticed like one hockey player, there was a news update where like he burned himself while he was cooking dinner. And then someone else had their car broken into. Very much an Out of the Park kind of thing, but just trying to add like those funny little story elements that Out of the Park is infamous for. I've noticed that happening in my game. So that was kind of neat. I don't know if it's maybe a little overboard for hockey. I don't know. It's such an Out of the Park thing. But it's interesting, so it could add some fun things to happen to your team. Finance system is back. Let me see if I can get through that menu here. Monthly finances, it's back again from 8. Didn't notice any big changes. I think 8, there was a couple bugs or a couple little weird scenarios depending on when you started your game. I think that's been accounted for in 9. So you shouldn't start out with like 0 points, or there were some weird things where the points would just be all screwed up depending on where you started. That seems to be accounted for, so I don't think it's a problem now. But pretty much this is the same as last year. Scouting also looks to be kind of the same. That got a big overhaul in 8. Don't think it's too much touched here. The only thing I notice is that in my historical save there is an iron curtain, so I cannot scout Russia. I can't hire scouts from Russia and stuff like that. I don't know if that was accounted for in 8 already, but this looks to be about the same. The UI interface, I think, is okay. They kind of mixed what they did with 8. 8 kind of had like these blocky tabs, and 7 was kind of a little bit more smoothed out. So they kind of did like this hybrid interface. Not the biggest fan of it. I think it's just personal preference, but it's okay. I think these menus up here probably need some work. So in 10, I would like to see these kind of updated, maybe streamlined a little bit. Yeah, I think this could use a little cleaning up. Not a huge deal, but if you've played the last few games, nothing's changed there. One thing that is huge, lines is about the same as usual. And you have your lineups. But one of the biggest, huge, amazing update is tactics here. Tactics now finally tells you who in your lineup fits with each strategy. So right now for this breakout, I have Stretch. Ronning's a great fit. I have good fits with Luke, Dino, and Tonelli. But I can change it, and it's going to update it here. So along the boards, players from my roster are all over the place. Strict positional, again, that's updated. So now it's way easier to understand what works for your team or not. So through the center, no one's bad at it. There's no terrible fits, but only Gretzky and Nichols are good. Is that better than along the boards where more players fit, but more players are out of sync? That's for you to decide. And that's for every single strategy, tactic, I should say, that's available here. Thank God, because I would just have the AI do it and kind of hope that it was correct. Now it kind of finally feels like you can make some decisions that make sense, and makes a couple calls here. So huge update. Really, really like that. Thank God, and I really appreciate that. I have noticed, now this is a historical save, so things could be a little different. But I will give them credit. Historical players have different positional stats. The stats do look a little bit different. So, like, for example, a lot of players are not very good with some of these goal-scoring offensive forward positions. There's a way more emphasis on grinder, defensive forward, and enforcer that I'm used to when I've played my games in more modern eras. Steve Duchesne's one of these like rare. He almost looks like a modern player, which is rare in this 1988 era. So the era does feel different. The players do feel different depending on where you're playing a later era or a more modern era. Like John Tonelli, he's a winger, but he's not a good goal scorer. He's not great at any of these up here. He's very mediocre. He's way better as a defensive forward. He's way better in grinder and two-way. And so you notice in these older games, it's kind of weighted a little bit more towards the bottom here. So it does feel different. And I have noticed that I've also run with hitting turned up a little higher than I normally do in modern games. And I'm not getting as many penalties. In modern games, I've noticed that like if you turn it up to the 4th or 5th setting, which I believe is here. So I have it up to 4. In modern eras, that seems to draw a lot of penalties, especially 5. Like forget it. I don't really get that many penalties. Yeah, sure, I get a couple here and there, but it's not as bad as the modern era. So I think the game kind of accounts for the era a little bit, because it seems to let me get away with more hitting than usual. One thing I would like to see changed is most of the stats are here, which is great, but to see special abilities, that's under the bio section. So here, Gretzky, of course, he has 3 special abilities, which is the maximum amount you can have. Most players have 0. 1 is nice, 2 is exceptional, and 3 is insanely rare. So he has soft passer, and you can highlight it, and it'll tell you what that is. But I wish this could be moved from the bio page to just put like a little box here. I think that would be perfect. I don't know why it's in the bio page. It's just kind of awkward, and so you kind of miss it. So it is worth going to the bio page. Sometimes even I forget to do it, and just flicking through and just checking. So Dino has infuriating. Most of the guys on my team don't have anything, but Doug Crossman has 2Ks. I think this is a bad one. Yeah, so he gets traded very often, and teams don't value him. So there are some weird ones. I think they added some new ones. Or at least I'm seeing them more often. I felt like in 8, I never saw any special abilities. You can actually see them in 8. And some of them are good, some of them are bad, but they're just trying to reflect a little bit some of the character of the players themselves. So that's a nice update there. Fan happiness, the data screen. If you've played the previous games, this is very familiar to you. Fan happiness is back, of course. Looks to be working the same. If you trade away popular players, it will hurt you. I have noticed that in this game here, so Mike Allison was a popular player. Now, he's not necessarily a good player, but historically he was popular. And so when I traded him away, that did actually hurt me there. So those little things there are nice. It's not just the players who are good. They have put some thought into making sure that if you're playing a historical game, historically popular players at the time, it will reflect that. Rosters will also reflect the injuries. So if someone, they were hurt going into the 90 season, you'll see their injury as close as they could get it is in the game. For the most part, it's not 100% perfect. I know that they've been working on that, but if you like playing historical stuff, they've gone through and try to update the injuries, and I know they're still updating that, so you can replay a specific season or start from a specific season if you have a certain challenge in mind. I think for the most part, everything else is pretty much the same. The 2D engine is a lot better. Runs a lot faster. There's way less bugs. Players move a little bit more realistically. They've done things like add some celebration animations. There's an opening start animations to the game. Players play behind the net, which I never really noticed in prior versions of this game. So I noticed that players will play behind the net. They'll wait for someone to get open and pass the puck. 7, I think it was 7 when they first introduced the 2D engine. It had this really bad, super bad habit of if the puck would get knocked into the corner, a bunch of players would like swirl around and chase the puck until it got into the corner, and then it would just be an icing and a face-off. That was reduced in 8, and I can say in 9, I almost never see it. It's very, very rare, extremely rare. And if it does happen, it's not as awkward. The game seems to pick up on that weird little bug if it happens, and just kind of calls it a lot quicker. So way less awkward stuff. 8 also had a bad habit. I don't know why it would happen, but there would be a face-off, and then there was a weird glitch, at least in my game, where if you were on your opponent's end, it would like glitch out and mirror to the total opposite side to the other face-off. And sometimes the goalies would get moved around. It was weird. That happened more often than I would care for. It didn't seem to screw up the game, but it was just visually jarring. And goalies would get frozen in the net. if you swap goalies out in the middle of a game in 8, the goalie would kind of be like stuck and frozen in the net still visually. He wouldn't affect the game. The new goalie would be in and would be moving and playing properly, but it was just a weird visual bug. All that seems to be gone. I haven't noticed any of that at all. So looks like the 2D engine got big upgrades. So if you were kind of avoiding the 2D engine in prior versions because you thought it was a little too buggy or things were a little weird or didn't look right, this by far is the best version that they've come up with. And I think it's good. I really do think it's good overall. I really think it is way improved. It's worth watching. I'm watching pretty much every game in 2D. For me, I think it's really fun and does feel pretty realistic. As much as any sports Sims game is going to get. But yeah, they did a really good job. They've updated the logos for the historical era for the NHL, so that's already in here. This used to be modded in, old NHL logos and even this orange logo, but that's been added correctly. There are mods to add trophies. There are mods to add some of the extra icons here, like I can show you these kind of things. I prefer the generic icons, but people have modded in the specific trophy little pictures here. So the community has stepped up and made a big difference there. One of the big modes and one of the big features is the NCAA college option, so you can play college teams. And I believe the logo mod does include the real college logo, so if you want to play that. I have not done a college save, so I will have to try that at some point. I'm just having too much fun with the historical game I'm running. But they've added mechanics to reflect the fact that you're drafting players. They have to commit to your school and things like that. So it's college and pro leagues is a very different type of animal, and that seems to be reflected here. So as far as I can say, I haven't played Eastside Hockey Manager. I know in a lot of people's minds that is the be-all, end-all hockey sim, and fair enough. I'm not going to argue with you on that, but Franchise Hockey Manager 9 is getting better every single version. 7 was a big step up from 6, 8 was a big step up from that, and 9 is a big step up from 8. So I think this version of the game is well worth your money if you got 8 and you thought maybe, if you were watching a lot of 2D and 8 was a little buggy or it didn't seem totally right. I think 9 is worth the upgrade. If you were waiting for college, well, you just got to get 9, period. But, I think it's really good. And if you haven't jumped into the series at all and you don't know which one to get, just get 9. Absolutely get 9. There's no reason to get any older version of this game. Any hockey you can think of, you can pretty much do in this. If you want to play some obscure Russian league, or you want to play some European league, you want to play in the minor leagues, you want to make up your own league, that it's all in here. You have the options for that. It's a very different animal to play and run a hockey team. If you're used to, Football Manager or even Out of the Park Baseball, you don't need to be a hockey nut to find this being fun. I think if you don't like hockey, this is going to suck you in and you're going to start to like it. Managing the lines and having a roster, fitting the cap, knowing what kind of contracts to get, getting the lines working, because even if you have great star players, they're not going to be playing more than, 20 plus minutes. So you need to have some depth in your lines. You need to have some defensive players. You need to have some goalies. You need to be developing people in the minors. Injuries happen a fair amount in the NHL or in hockey in general, and they can be pretty nasty, and they can be for quite a while. So Jim Fox, he's out indefinite. I think he even started the season. Yeah, he started the season indefinite. I think this is a historical, like I was saying, recreation of a real-life injury. So he's been out the whole season. And Dale DeGray, who's been out for like almost a month, and he still has 2 to 3 weeks. So injuries can absolutely throw a monkey wrench into your entire plan. You have to be flexible. You got to be ready to call guys up. You got to be ready to sign guys. You need to be ready to think about the positions and what positions they're playing here. These roles, all these roles are different, and will change things. And there's just a lot of options here. Do you change your roster? Do you change your lines? Are you changing the minutes? Are you changing the positions? Are you changing your tactics? Do you need to change your staff? So there's a lot of things to do in this game. There's a lot of things to learn. There's a steep learning curve, but once you get into it, I think it's really good. And it's definitely worthwhile. It's not just a redressing of Football Manager. It's not just a redressing of Out of the Park Baseball. This is its own thing. Very worthwhile. Pick it up. I really recommend it. I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. I think for Franchise Hockey Manager 10, I would like to see the interface updated a little bit. I think the finance mechanics could have some improvements. It's getting there. It's the basic structure of finance mechanics, but seeing that updated. But kind of those role play immersive things are getting slowly added to the game, and is really making things feel more alive. It feels more like a league where people are playing, whether they're all-stars or they're fictional characters or they're guys who are playing in the modern era. So hats off to Out of the Park. They did a great job. And thanks for watching. Bye-bye.